Well arrived everyone, we are on the eve of our second reset of Season 2, and for today we have a personal challenge of myself. I wanted to challenge myself to try to make a video guide with some tips and tricks and some quality of life hacks for Brackenhide Hollow. It's a challenge because I could be talking about what to do in this dungeon for about an hour, but instead I want to make it a sub 10-minute video. So even the intro is too long for this type of video. So number one, I'm gonna give you one of the default routes that is often taken in Brackenhide Hollow. You start here, starting to make your way to get all of the 5 cages you need to unlock the boss, and then, like you also might have seen, you go right instead of left right after the first boss. This might be quite confusing because it's very messy in the type of mobs that are in here. After the second boss and you do the patrol on the bridge, you skip right here, avoiding these stealthy fuckers over here. You skip them, and then for the most part it's a pretty easy route, with the exception of sneaking past this side of the room, even though this looks scary. No, you actually don't pull these even without Mind Soothe. You actually don't need it. You can just hug the wall and get past them. Now, besides the route, what is actually dangerous in this dungeon and what you should be keeping track of? Let's just start with the absolutely most obvious one, which is right on pull, and for several pulls after, you have the Bracken Warscourge. Now, this cartoony looking guy has this thing right here called Rage Storm and Hideous Cackle. So number one, it has an AOE fear. You always want to interrupt. It's the most important of the spells to interrupt out of the trash mobs in here. And then Rage Storm. This is mostly because it's going to annoy your melee DPS. Now Rage Storm is an enrage, which means it can be soothed, it can be dispelled by druid, by hunters, and also a bit by evokers with their longer cooldown. This guy is basically the biggest threat. Now, there are slightly smaller threats, but still something you might have seen killing your party a lot. This guy right here, Claw Fighter with Vicious Claw Mango. This is basically a fixate. A fixate on a random player that is not a tank, which does a lot of damage. Now, luckily, this fella is able to be affected by all kinds of CCs, including stuns and disorients. So all you have to do is wait for him to get his fixate going and then stop him, and he will stop. Those two type of mobs will be pretty much in the realm of the physical damage done, the only two threats, up to the null type of trash mobs. When it comes to magical damage, you have the Mystic. The Mystic has Witherbolt, which does a lot of damage, and it's gonna be one of your priority interrupts to stop. And then Earthbolt, which is your lower priority damage, your lower spell in need of an interrupt. Yes, you can be unlucky. Yes, you can have 2 Mystics casting Earthbolt on the same target and 2-shot him. That's unlucky. And then the other of the casters you want to keep an eye out on is gonna be the Speaker, mostly because of the Rot Chanting Totem that you want to focus whenever it is spawned, and Withering Burst, which is also another very high burst damage ability that you do want to interrupt. So all the way up to the first round of trash, the first half of the trash for the gnolls, you want to dispel or get away from the Rage Storm. You want to crowd control the fighters when they start fixating on people, and you want to focus your interrupts on the AOE fear of the Warscourge, the Witherbolt of the Mystic, and the Withering Burst of the Speaker. That's the main danger of the trash up to the first boss. Now, as far as the first boss goes, most people will be recommending to focus Gnashtooth, because likely the most dangerous part of the fight is going to be both Gash Frenzy and Marked for Butchery. Marked for Butchery is just a single target focused heavy damage on a particular player, which isn't even dodgeable. I see many players trying to run away from Marked for Butchery as if it does a difference. It doesn't. You have to actually survive it. And then you have Gnash Frenzy, which is a lot of damage over the party, and you need to top yourself up above 90% health to get rid of this dot. That's when you want to focus your defensives, your health potions, and any kind of heal you have in your kit to get rid of this debuff. The rest of the fight is quite simple and self-explanatory. You want to run away from the Rage Storm. This one isn't dispellable like the one from the trash mobs. You want to interrupt the healing of Trick Totem, and then you want to do the minigame when Decayed Senses happens, when your tank gets disoriented and your healer is turned into a chicken. You want to get rid of the totem so the healer can dispel the tank, so the tank can stand in front of Hackclaw, who is doing the savage charge to a random player and is about to one-shot him. Instead, the tank will save him. That is a quite straightforward first boss. Now, the clusterfuck happens in between the first and second boss. That's also where the majority of your trash will happen. So here, it's a whole lot of AoE. It's a whole lot of a million things, mostly harmless things, going to be spawning, and you got to AoE them down. There are a bunch of trees, Decayed Elders, which just continue to summon Lashers, continue to summon more and more Smallies, and they also do have a target cast for a root, which is not that dangerous across all of this trash. What gets more dangerous is the two types of gnolls still present in this trash. One is the Shaper. The Shaper is the one that continues, once again, to spawn Lashers, but also cast Touch of Decay. This is similar to the Earth Bolt spam of the first type of gnolls. You might be unlucky and get multiple of these cast on you at once, which might get you one shot. What is more dangerous though is the Rotsinger, mostly because the Rotsinger is the one going to be summoning the totem. The totem is the one that, if you don't kill it in time, is going to give withering to all players. Withering is the disease which slows you, which reduces your haste, stacking over time. So in here, disease dispels are very valuable. But besides those two gnolls, those two caster gnolls, and about a million little plants and little tree branches, the other trash in here is going to be the Wilted Oak. This guy is rather harmless. He does have a very dangerous ability, Necrotic Breath, which is very easy really to silence, as you don't have that many casts worth interrupting when you're fighting this big guy. And then the Stomp. Circle AoE around him, simply move out of it. It might get a bit hectic, as I mentioned, because this type of pools have tons of extra adds spawning, so it gets kind of difficult to see what is happening in the trash pack. But it's still manageable. He is still big enough for you to see him across all of the trash you're doing. After all of this trash, you reach Treemouth. Now, what's important about Treemouth is to understand that every once in a while, when he casts Grasping Vines, you want to have at least one of the players getting eaten by the boss, otherwise he will enrage. Now, the obvious and most standard strategy is to let the tank, especially the tank with an immunity, soak multiples of them, because you can cycle the immunity with your defensives. However, it can still be nice to have multiple players with immunities. The reason for that is because after the boss eats one of the players, he is also going to be gaining an Absorb Shield. But if the player he just ate is using an immunity, like for example Cloak, like for example Bubble, or even Ice Block, then the boss won't be gaining the Absorb Shield. So effectively you are doing more damage, because you have to do no extra damage to a shield. So besides the rotation of who gets eaten by the boss, it's mostly about keep the boss faced away from the rest of the group, because he's gonna cast Vine Whip in the direction of the tank, and try to get close, but not too close if you are the one targeted by Decay Spray. The reason why you don't want to get too close is because Decay Spray not only spawns the 4 adds, but it also does damage in front of him. So you don't want to stay in melee, but also you don't want to stay in Africa, because then you're going to be spawning the 4 adds in Africa, and it's going to be more annoying and troublesome to AoE them down. Now, once you get rid of Treemouth, the trash is almost gone at this point. You have to get rid of Stink Breath in the bridge. Now, the very important part about this mob to make it faster is that his Stink Breath has a 30-yard range. TLDR, if you are a ranged DPS, you can all outrange him. Just stay far in the back, and then you can just ignore the Stink Breath, the disorient damage he does. Important after him to take a sharp turn right up this little hill to avoid the 2 stealthy gut stabbers in here, so you can do the full skip down this pack. This pack is very dangerous, with the Vicious Hyenas scenting meat, and then the mob himself, the Stalker, casting Scented Meat. So he's gonna focus one of the players, so that the hyenas are going to focus on that player. This is made quite simple if you have any type of immunity. If you have a Prot Paladin tank, for example, that can give out Blessing of Protection to one of the players being focused by the Scented Meat, that makes it much more trivial. And for healers, healers, the Bone Vault Volley is going to be doing a lot of physical damage over time to the whole group. That is going to be one of the roughest of the trash mobs, trash packs in this dungeon. Now, Gutshot is quite simple enough that in Fortified you are allowed, for example, to drag the last trash pack before the boss together with the boss. Now, the whole mechanic around this boss is that you want to be leading the hyenas on top of traps. You want to be doing as little damage as possible to the hyenas by yourself. You want to be focusing on single target damage and get rid of the hyenas by using the own boss's ensnaring traps to kill them. Now, you can be manipulating the fight yourself because the hyenas are going to fixate on certain players, and then the boss himself is going to be casting Meat Toss to one of the players to fixate the hyenas on him. So you have to be aware if you are the one being targeted, so you can position yourself behind a trap so the hyenas will get to you, get on the trap, and take damage. That is basically the whole thing about this boss. Lead the hyenas on top of the traps. Don't waste too much AOE damage on the hyenas, just do single target on the boss and trust that your party has a brain and gets to kill the hyenas with traps. Lastly, remember to interrupt Master's Call from the boss, because Master's Call is going to free the hyenas stuck on the traps and give them CC immunity. So you don't want to get that cast through. Now, after this third boss, the trash is almost done. You only have to get rid of one Filth Caller and about 1 million Witherlings right in here before you do the skip. After you do this skip, you go back to dealing with some of the null trash you have dealt with before, like the Filth Caller again, multiple Filth Callers, which is very important if you want to stop having to dodge multiple swirlies on the ground. Just stun the Rotting Surge cast. That is what continues to spawn swirlies on the ground. Besides the Filth Caller, you also have a whole bunch of other guys you have seen before, like the Rot Hexer or the War Scourge. The new one that you see in here, but this is mostly a concern for the tank, is the Wither Slasher. This guy is somewhat dangerous, but mostly for the tank, so you as a non-tank shouldn't worry too much about this trash. And lastly, you're gonna be reaching the Decaytriarch Wratheye, which has been luckily nerfed quite a bit since our first week of Tyrannical. So the trickier part about this fight is, of course, number one, focusing the totem that spawns before he gets to cast Withering Rot to the whole party. That's very important. The important part about dealing with this totem is for the tank to position himself correctly. The whole thing about the positioning is that as a tank, you want to be staying in front of the pool, the puddle that spawns and runs in circles, the choking rot cloud that moves around. That's because the boss is going to be summoning the totem in the opposite side of the room than where he is. So, of course, if you are next to this choking rot cloud, the boss is next to the choking rot cloud, which means the totem will be summoned in the opposite side of the room, where it is clear of the rot cloud, and you, as well as more importantly the melee DPS, can immediately jump on the totem. If from the moment the rot cloud spawns you run in the opposite direction, you run far away from the rot cloud, then the boss will be far away from the rot cloud, which means he will be spawning the totem possibly right, for example, in front of where the rot cloud is moving, which is going to make it impossible, basically, for the melee DPS to jump on the totem. Every third one of these totem casts, he is going to be casting Withered Eruption. This is going to be very deadly, because you have to make sure the totem dies before the Withering Eruption is cast, because if it doesn't, you're going to be taking the big AOE damage from Withering Eruption, plus extra damage per application of Withering Rot. If you did not kill the totem applied Withering Rot to everyone, so this AOE will be doing much more damage. And if you're talking about Tyrannical, if you're talking about high enough keys on Tyrannical, it will also one-shot pretty much every non-tank unless you're using a strong defensive. So that is the dangerous part in terms of damage taken from the boss to the party. The dangerous part in terms of damage taken to the tank is, of course, the K-Strike. You want to make sure, save your resources to be able to heal yourself or to absorb as much of the damage you're about to be taking from this ability because of the big healing absorb that will be left on you once the Decaytriarch is cast. But once the boss is over with, this is all that you have gone through on this dungeon. There isn't really much else left. So as I said, I started wanting to make this a sub 10-minute video, and of course, as usual, we are far off from making it a sub 10-minute video, but at least we tried, and that's what counts. So for today, I'm going to be leaving you with this Brackenhide Hollow guide. We're going to be seeing each other tomorrow on Wednesday as well. Thanks again, as usual, for all of the Patreon supporters, of course, and for everyone else who can support still in other ways completely for free, liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, together with following me over on my Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch. With these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, for one of these dungeons, I will manage to make it a sub 10-minute video, I swear.